Welcome to our town hall on campus public safety. We have a number of speakers and panelists on the call today, including Chancellor Jackson, who I'll introduce in a moment. We have Tim Thomas, who's our executive director of campus public safety. Amy Marshall is the associate director of campus public safety. Atheria Smith is our vice chancellor of general services. BC Hoff is our Director of Facilities and Operations in the Department of General Services. So pleased that Carmen Johnson has joined us. She's the CalWorks Coordinator at Merritt College and the co-chair of our Holistic Safety and Wellness Advisory Committee. Mildred Oliver was not able to join this morning. If she does join, we welcome her fondly. We are so glad that Professor Margaret Dixon has come out of retirement and has joined us on this panel. Thank you for being here, Professor Dixon. And we're also grateful that Dr. Stacy Thompson has come out of retirement. Dr. Thompson has been a longtime administrator at the Peralta Colleges and at the Chabot-Las Positas District. She's come out of retirement to serve as a consultant working with our campus public safety office. And again, my name's Mark Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Marketing, Communication, and Public Relations. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jannett Jackson, the Interim Chancellor of the Peralta Community College District, who has also come out of retirement to help Peralta over the last 2.5 years to navigate our accreditation challenges and in particular, this new situation where we no longer have armed police on our campuses. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome everyone. This is the second webinar that we've had. The first one that we had was back in 2022, where we combined both public safety and facilities. And now this is one that we're just focusing on public safety. So before we begin, because we want to make sure we have enough time to address any questions that people have, let me just give you just a brief history, because we've had a lot of new people join the district since 2020. So in 2020, the contract with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office expired and was not renewed. And also in 2020, if you recall, we went to a shelter in place because of COVID. Fortuitous for a number of reasons for us in terms of allowing us to make a smooth transition from not having Alameda County sheriffs providing campus safety until we hired Tim Thomas as the first Executive Director of Public Safety in November of 2021. That has not been that long ago. So there was nothing in place when he took over. He was a one-man show, is what I like to say. And in July of this year, Amy Marshall, who was the facilities director at Laney College, our largest campus, agreed to come over. Thank you very much, Dr. Besikoff, for giving us Amy, because it allowed us now not to just have one person working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but to have someone to share with, not only having that off cycle every now and then, and everybody gets a little sick. You notice I'm a little choked up this morning, so I'm going to try to limit my discussions unless when necessary. But it allowed us to have the flexibility to do things like this, to put together more webinars, to do more training, because it's not just all on the shoulders of one person. So today, Mark has already given you the housekeeping. Please use the Q&A so that we can capture your questions. This is going to be posted to the web when we finish with this. We also have given you a little bit of context of how we got here. And I want you to feel comfortable putting your questions out there. There are no, I had a student say, I was in China not too long ago, and a student mumbled, and I said, did you have a question? And, he shook his head. And I said, there's no dumb questions, because probably somebody is thinking of the same thing that you want to ask. So please, let's be respectful though. This isn't a place for us to throw stones and talk about how bad we are, but really is to try to build a sense of community around safety. So once Tim and Amy give you kind of an overview of what an update of what we've been doing in the last 18 months, then, excuse me, Dr. Thompson will then give you an overview of the survey that went out. And you'll probably be surprised by some of the comments that were made. And then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll do our Q&A based upon the questions. And if we can answer them, if they're quick questions, we'll do so in the chat so everybody knows. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Tim Thomas.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. And good morning, Peralta community. Just recently, we had a shooting over at Peralta Park, just near Laney College. We had a meeting September 20th with some of our leaders to discuss public safety and some of the challenges dealing with homelessness in the area. We talked about not only safety, but how we can work together to achieve the same result, which is having a safer community in and around our colleges, but also working together to address some of the safety concerns that were on our table. All of this information, as far as resourceful that we got with our district city council, Mrs. Byes as well, and her staff, we've made it really accessible on our public safety page, where you can find that information on some of the issues pertaining to the Peralta Park meeting on September 20th. Next slide. Safety training. Over the summer, we've been really busy, but I want to say thank you to Marina staff and the management for working with our training schedule that we've done with Marina Security. As you see on the slides, we've highlighted 4 areas that we've done and covered this summer. First, beginning with first aid and CPR, and also Narcan, we're at 94%, and as Marina Security staff. Moving over to our mental health first aid, we've completed 10 classes, and we're at 87%, and that's a real good number for us. We're really comfortable about that number, feel good about it, with our staff being on the ground dealing with a student that might be going through a dysregulated moment. We feel with that training, it gives another identifiers to understand signs and symptoms of what that student might be going through. So it's worked out with our staff. Moving forward down below with de-escalation, we've conducted 3 classes. We're at 79%. And then moving over roles and responsibilities, we're at 73%. Some of these trainings we have listed here have also been conducted with our health and safety teams. Currently, right now, I have the numbers to compile, but we'll be presenting those numbers at a later date with our health and safety teams on those trainings as needed. Next slide. Safety and badging events. Last year, we came to the board and we really want to explain some of the things that we wanted to get out of public safety. We wanted to come up with a concept, right? We wanted to figure out how to make safety fun, how to get people to feel like they're really a part of something. And we got some results last year, but we wanted to improve those results with community-based data. And so we brought the show on the road. And one of those things that we started out was Safety and Badge Day at the campuses. So I want to thank the campus leadership, the campus presidents, all the people who were involved in helping us create this environment and also bringing it to the colleges. It was really a point of engagement that we talked about, the 3 E's, engage, empower, and equip. And so we're showing the evidence based on some of the things we spoke about in our safety update to the board on how we were going to bring safety to the college. And one of the things we highlighted was badging, being able to have a clear badge, being able to understand who works here, who doesn't, really had a great impact of effect on what we were trying to do at the colleges. While we were doing badging, we thought it was a great time to really get some results from our public safety survey. So we were getting those numbers as well, but also getting a chance to engage with staff and answer questions that were people had at that particular time. If you look down below, we've also done at a Flex Day, where we had a campus security meeting on safety strategies, where we broke out into group scenarios and went over real events that have happened within our district, and got some feedback from those folks who were there. So we thank those participants that were there for Flex Day on our safety and strategies. Also at Merritt College, we took the opportunity to engage a little bit more with our students, and we're recruiting for our administrative justice program. We feel that that's a vital part of safety, and people would like to have our program back, so we're recruiting students. So we're using all of these platforms for safety to highlight as we come to your campuses to talk about safety for our staff and students. Next slide. And I'll transition this slide over to Executive Mark Johnson.
Unmuting myself here. Thank you, Executive Director Thomas. We're very excited about Rave communication technology. I've been working closely with Tim and Amy and our Department of General Services, Vice Chancellor Etheria Smith, to bring on Rave. A little bit of background. 4 years ago, we had a system called Blackboard Connect, which was a fully integrated emergency communication system, but it was phenomenally expensive. And I thought that we could do things much more cost effectively, and we did. We teased apart our communication tools to help save the taxpayers some money. But fortunately, the state chancellor's office has made Rave available to community college districts in the California system free of charge. So it is hard to beat free in terms of being cost effective for the taxpayers. So we're in the process of completing the paperwork to piggyback on the statewide license for Rave emergency communications. This is a tool that allows us to send out fully integrated emergency communications, such as email alerts, SMS or text messages, robocalls. It has an RSS feature, which allows us to immediately update our websites based on emergency situations. We can segment our audiences by district-wide communications or campus-specific communications, and potentially even subsets of campus communications. So we're very, very excited about this new communication technology. And I'll turn it back over to Director Thomas. Anything else you want to add there?
Yes, thank you, Executive Mark Johnson. That we're practicing this system, and we're having our lockdown training with Marine Security to be going over some of the functions that we'll be bringing when we start the lockdown training at some of the campuses when we look at some of the things moving forward. Next slide. As previously mentioned, when we get to our lockdown training, well, we have an update on our emergency operation plan. And currently right now, KSL, myself are doing the finishing touches getting those flip charts in the classrooms, so that when you have an emergency evacuation, we know where to go and we know how to respond. We also have the numbers that are there to call in case of emergency. We'll have everything really accessible with just by having one flip chart. We'll also have single flip charts that will have our top 5 emergency disasters on there as well. So if you're not able to grab one flip chart, the other flip chart will be readily accessible with all the same information on how to respond in an emergency. Also in that flip chart, we'll have the operational emergency operational plan evacuations on that flip chart as well. So these posters, emergency posters, will be posted as well throughout the campuses that you will see as detailed, kind of described here. You can look at on the slide what we have moving forward on our emergency operation plan. Next slide. And now I'll be transitioning this over to Dr. Stacy Thompson.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am really excited to be here. Believe it or not, at 9 o'clock, 9:30 on a Monday morning. But I'm excited because I'm working with Margaret Dixon and Dr. Jackson. Again, it's an old home week in some ways, because we were together back in 2000, what was it, 2014, yes, when I was dean at Merritt, and worked with Ms. Dixon before she and I both retired on some of these same issues that the district and the colleges are facing today. And so I want to share with you some of the survey results. We wanted to do a survey, an additional survey, so that we can continue to have all the most recent thinking of the Peralta folks around their concepts of safety, given how safety issues are changing dramatically, especially in the city of Oakland. So this survey was opened on Flex Day, which was August 17th, 2023. And the last respondents were received on September 19th, and we received over 600 responses from students and employees. I also want to add that we did that the district conducted a survey where there were 6,000 respondents in November of 2021. And we're looking at correlating those results from that time to this survey. We also got some feedback during the charrette that was held at the district office in October of 2022. And we gathered a lot of information from Peralta employees and our community partners around safety issues in the cities that we serve. In October of 2022, we gathered more information, did an additional survey, and in August of this year, during District Flex Day, we had a very lively discussion around our presentation on public safety. It was very lively. If you missed it, you missed a really good time. It was a lot of great conversation. But what we did notice is that there was different conversations at in different settings. And so and the chancellor is committed to having these ongoing conversations around public safety, so that we are, she is continually staying abreast of what folks are thinking and how the things that have been instituted to address the concerns that have been raised, that folks are aware of them. So first slide, please. Thanks to those of you who participated in the survey. So we wanted to be sure and ask the question of gender, because as a woman, I know that I have particular concerns around safety that men might have, as do non-binary and trans folks. They have unique safety concerns. And so you can see here that we got a good response from women. And so we can see that we had 348 women respond, 206 men. We had a fewer number of trans and non-binary, which 24 and 5 respectively, but enough to get some information about how folks feel safe. Next slide, please. So participant by age group, we found that the largest group that responded was 18 to 24. And you will see that when we talk about roles, then that's probably because there was a disproportionate number of students that responded. But the 35 to 45-year-olds and the 55 to 64-year-olds had comparable numbers, as you can see here on the chart, and that the aging populations, of which I am a member, so I can say, have additional concerns about safety that younger folks don't have. Next slide, please. So location. So we asked this question specifically because we noticed that those folks that participated in these different surveys and the charrette and Flex Day came from different campuses. And so there were different ideas or concerns about feeling safe based on which campus they came from. And that makes sense because it's about location. And so, as you can see here on this slide, that the majority of the responses came from Laney and from BCC, though there was representation from all the colleges and the district. But you can see Laney had by far the most respondents with 201. Next slide, please. So the role, most of the respondents, over 300 are from students, as I mentioned earlier, having to correlate that with age, but not necessarily because we're a community college. So we know we have students of all ages. Responses from faculty and staff are roughly about the same, about 100. Students were majority, 319, with more than 3 times as many respondents as in any other category combined. And so not to take away or add anything to that, but I know that when I looked at the responses and saw the number of students that responded, it made me think of the responses in a certain way, and we can talk about that in the Q&A if you like. Next slide, please. So 69% of the folks that responded to if they feel very safe or somewhat safe was 69%. So 28% feel unsafe or somewhat unsafe. So over half, a good majority, feel safe. Next slide, please. How safe do you feel by gender? Again, I had asked this question and we wanted to get the results of this by gender and by campus so that we can look at, are there particular things that are happening at each campus where women feel safer than men, or trans or non-binary folks feel safe or unsafe? There weren't quite enough respondents to make any sort of conclusion around the non-binary or trans populations, but we can see that of those that responded, that the women and men felt safe or somewhat safe on all 4 campuses and the district office. Next slide, please. Next slide, okay. Public safety officer staffing and visibility. 53% strongly agree or somewhat agree that there are enough public safety officers and staffing and that they're visible on campus. 38% strongly or somewhat agree. So what we know is that 62% feel that public safety officers are visible. So the ones that are there are visible is how I would interpret those numbers. And I hope you guys are giving me some extra credit for all this number talk, because it's definitely not. I would rather just talk. But we got the numbers, so we want to share it with you. Next slide, please. So understanding safety roles, about, let's say 49%, about half of the respondents strongly agree or somewhat agree. And they know the difference between safety aides and security guards. And I think that we might need to have a conversation about this a little later. 50% know what the difference between a deputy and a security guard, a deputy and a security guard, sorry. Hold on a minute, I lost you guys. Where'd it go? Oh, there you are, okay. And I'm sure Ms. Dixon's gonna wanna have a conversation with y'all about that. Next slide, please. All right, security measures and personnel roles. Ooh, hold on a minute. Lost my little thing here. Sorry, I lost my place. So, are there sufficient security measures in and around the campus buildings? 45% strongly agree or somewhat agree, while 46% somewhat agree or strongly disagree. So this is pretty much evenly divided. So I don't know what we can gather from that. Next slide, please. And so this is the same question around personnel and roles. So let's go to the next slide. Hold on a minute. I keep losing my place here. So information sharing and marina security. So are there sufficient security members in and around the building? Okay, information sharing, number 23, slide 23. Information sharing, 38% strongly agree or somewhat agree, and 52% disagree or strongly agree. So there's a communications concern to a majority of the respondents. Marina security officers are courteous. 54% strongly agree and or somewhat agree, and 11% disagree. Interesting that 35% responded in A to this question. Okay, lighting. Having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. Sorry, thank you for bearing with me on this. Well, so we're on slide 24. So, hold on. Sorry, hold on. Lighting, 48% agree or somewhat agree that lighting is sufficient. 37% somewhat agree or strongly disagree. 222 strongly agree or somewhat agree, while 175 doing a head count, so we can look at the difference in that regard. So next slide, please, number 25. Majority are unaware of marina security escort service. Next slide, number 26. That around unsafe areas on campus. So we see here that that there is a large that yes, that there are a larger percentage of folks. Are there areas on campus that feel unsafe to you? Yes, next slide, please. And more training on lockdown scenarios is needed because we see there's a vast number of folks who would not know what to do if there was an active shooter, if there was a dangerous animal or any unknown threat. And Director Thomas has put together a very lovely list of trainings that he is providing this fall, and he will share it with you during this session.
Dr. Thompson, could you go back one slide? There was a question about the interpretation about feeling safe and unsafe. So this goes back to a previous question that an individual put in the chat rather than Q&A. So I'll just try to go over this slide because I don't know which one they were referring to. And the question was, are there areas on campus that feel unsafe to you? And so a slightly more than half felt like it was safe. And then the red indicates those that feel that it is unsafe. So we still need to do some work in this area where people feel unsafe, because we don't want it to be close to 50%. We want it to be somewhere down in the, the lower third or the lower, 1/3 of the number of individuals. And it may be because of a lot of different things. We don't know why people don't feel unsafe. We ask specific questions regarding it, which is why you see that about the lighting, and we broke it down by campus. But all of this will be available to you. We're putting it online because today is Yom Kippur. And I will tell you my apologies. We moved this 3 times before we came up with this date. So for those of you that are celebrating or in honor of Yom Kippur that may not be here, it will be available online. So I'm sorry, Stace, I just wanted to address it because it was in the chat, it wasn't in Q&A. Thank you.
And I want to circle back around. I'm sorry, I was having technical difficulties and my screen blacked out on me, and I was trying not to freak out on you guys, but I was trying to be as graceful as I could to get through that. But I do want to also say that from the written comments that there were a couple of themes that emerged from that. And one of them was how we're going to address the unhoused issue was one. Mental health concerns around students who have mental health have mental health issues at how is the staff, here we go, unhoused, lighting and cameras, mental health, and law enforcement. So unhoused, predominantly Laney, but also BCC and College of Alameda had some concerns around, how we're addressing those unhoused folks who add a particular element of safety for some folks. Lighting and cameras, and I know that Director Thomas and Amy have been working diligently on getting in with a theory of resolve those issues. And if I'm not mistaken, they're very close to getting all those cameras and lighting worked out. They may share that when we have Q&A. And then the mental health piece, there was some concern in the chat, not in the chat, in the written comments around, folks not being knowing how to address students or even faculty and staff who have mental health issues, who have mental health breaks. And so Director Thomas has offered a variety of trainings, and he shared that in his presentation. And we just need folks to make themselves available to participate in those trainings once he makes them available again. He had a pretty good turnout, if I recall, a pretty good number, but always looking for more so that everyone can be fully equipped to handle those concerns when they come up when you have a student who's having a mental health breakdown or break. And then law enforcement was a big conversation. Lots of responses around that. Should we, shouldn't we? Should we bring the sheriffs back? Should we have folks, with guns on campus for security, or should we not? And this certainly is not the venue by which we would make a decision about that, but it was definitely something that is on folks' mind and came up a lot in the written comments. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Before we close this particular section, we just wanted to give you the contact information for our campus public safety office. You can call the switchboard at 510-466-7236. And it also has its own portion of the Peralta website at campus-public. That should be a dash, not a slash. Apologies. I'll fix that before we get this slide posted. In case of emergency, always dial 911 first before you call the switchboard. We want to get emergency professionals on location as fast as possible. So if it is an actual emergency, dial 911 before you call the public safety office. So at this point in the program, we had scheduled a 10-minute break. Let's see, I have us at 10:06. We're ahead of schedule. Why don't we regroup at 10:15 to pick up the conversation and bring you in. So the way that will work is we're going to have a panel discussion as we address all of the remaining questions that are in the Q&A, but we'll also allow you all to raise your hands, click the raise hand button in Zoom, and I'll move you from the participant list to a panelist so that you can ask your question, and then the panelists will do our best to get your question answered. And if you just want to make a public statement, not a question, that's also fine as well. We want to hear what your thoughts are on public safety. So we will now take a break. Okay, good morning, Peralta. We've had a nice break. Hope you had a chance to have another cup of coffee or tea and get a refreshment before we begin the forum part of our town hall on public safety. My name is Mark Johnson. I'm joined by a distinguished panel of colleagues to help answer your questions. And as a reminder, the people that are on the panel with us today are Chancellor Jackson, Tim Thomas, Amy Marshall, Etheria Smith, BC Hoff, Carmen Johnson, Margaret Dixon, Dr. Stacy Thompson, and myself. The way this will work is we'll work through the questions in the Q&A to get those answered, and then we'll also I'll be keeping an eye on the panelist list for people who have raised their hands. If you raise your hand, I'll promote you to be a panelist. You can make your statement, you can make your comment, you can ask your question, and then the panelists will respond. So with that, let me.
And Mark, just another item, when people, if you do come on and ask questions, if you would identify who you are and what campus you're, either if you're a student, what's your primary campus, or if you're a staff, which campus or district office you are assigned to, just so we know. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Chancellor. One of the first questions that or one of the questions that popped up in the Q&A is regarding the difference between deputies, security guards, and safety aides. So I'm hoping that our panelists can help disambiguate those different roles in public safety. And I think we should allow Professor Dixon to maybe take the first pass at that one and then turn it over to Director Thomas. So Professor Dixon, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's a great question because we want to make sure that there's no confusion, especially when we start talking about roles and responsibility. It is obvious that right now the role and responsibility for the safety of our campus is Marina Bay. The district has hired them to make sure that we're safe on campus. But in case of an emergency, there are things that Marina Bay will not be able to handle that we'll have to get help from our outside partners, perhaps OPD, police officers. Now, what I want you to understand that right now, OPD has also employed CHP, Highway Patrol. So there very well might be a CHP officer to arrive at our campuses. And that creates another problem because one, they're not familiar with our campuses. So it's important that we have somebody there to direct them. Safety aides. Right now, there are no safety aides on either campus. I am in the process now of training the ones at Merritt. We have new students that have signed up. They're getting ready to go through the interview process. And those students' uniforms will be different. I noticed that Marina Bay wears turquoise shirts. There will be no turquoise shirts for safety aides. Their vests will say safety aid. Their shirts will say safety aids. So again, they should be easy to identify. So we're looking at roles and responsibility. What would be a safety aide's role on the campus with Marina Bay? It's going to vary. It's going to vary. And again, Tim and I will make sure that those roles are clear so that everyone knows, am I calling the safety aide? Do I want Marina Bay? What's the need? I hope I answered that and talked about the difference between the three.
Tim?
And I would say, Ms. Dixon, you did answer that question fully. Also, just indicating how we respond to emergencies is why we have a continuum of when we use our outside municipalities for services. And as dealing with some of our issues, looking at it from a holistic standpoint, we feel that if we have training, we can deal with our own issues and then mitigate those issues by having those reports go out to our professionals within our campus to address student needs and concerns, but also providing resources for those students in that dysregulated moment. So we feel, when that continuum escalates beyond the scope of a security guard is when we use our outside resources.
Great, thank you. So our next question comes from the submitted Q&A. It's from
Mark, before you go on, I just want to add something to this discussion, not so much to discern between one group or another, but the fact that the board passed a resolution endorsing what the college district as a whole put forward with holistic wellness and safety. We have to have a single point of focus. I've seen one campus try to start something that was already started by public safety. We have Professor Dixon, who's come back to help us with the administration of justice as a mechanism for screening and having individuals go through the training. So I would really ask that we have a public safety office. Let's use it rather than have all of these little pop-ups of one-offs and nothing is the same. Uniforms may not be the same. Training may not be the same. Orientations may not be the same. Safety is not something that you want to have each little district or each little campus, doing its own thing. It needs to be a concerted effort. It needs to be the same no matter what campus you're on. You know what you're going to do, not, these one-offs. So I just want to put that down. That was the guidance that we got from the board, which is why it approved a district-wide position, director of public safety. We didn't create a public safety on each campus. We have safety committees that are, collegial recommendation committees, but please, people get ideas and then they want to run with it without going through and vetting the whole process. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that since people are saying now, what's the difference between one and the other? Imagine if every campus had its own and they came up with the colors of the campus, and who would know who's who? So we can't really function efficiently that way. So I just wanted to put that out as part of this question. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chancellor. So the next question is from our Q&A feature, and it's an anonymous question, but it's the multi-million-dollar question. And it is it possible to have police or increased security services in Oakland like the Marshal deputy? The Marina Company is not authorized to make arrests, and simply removing people is not enough. The level of violence in Oakland requires more enforcement at Laney. Chancellor, I think this is for you to comment on first.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it, and then Tim, I'm going to ask you for some statistics. First of all, the decision was made by the board, as I stated at the beginning, in 2020, not to extend the contract after 15 years of working with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. The decision was made, and there was a lot of things that were going on during that time, which I'm not going to speculate on. I just will tell you, go back and look. There was, something, the BART shootings, Saves Lives, Black Lives Matters movement. A lot of things were going on throughout this country. We had a different president that was in the office at that time. So with all of that, the decision was made not to extend the contract for Alameda County Sheriff's Office. And frankly, we really had no plan. We just said, I don't want that. I don't know what I want, but I don't want that. And that, like I said, we were in a shelter in place during that period of time. So it gave us a chance to make a transition. And that transition was based upon the initiatives that came forward to the board, is to go with a security company. Because frankly, we did not have the ability to provide the security ourselves. So we had to go out with something. We went out with an RFP, people bid on that. Then we come to find out some of those individuals that bid it didn't have the right credentials. And so we had to start back from scratch again. All of this took place between 2020 and 2021, a year. So we started to come back in 2021, if you recall. We started a little bit at a time, starting to bring people back. And then we did it more 100% to some extent in 2022. So between 2021, which is when Director Thomas was hired, he had to start from scratch with nothing. And you cannot say, well, wait till I plan for a year. And by the time I plan for a year or 2 years and come up with the perfect plan, then we can roll it out and deploy it. We had to do something. We had people coming on campus. Oakland was in disarray. You remember they fired their police chief. So we had to do something. And so Marina Security, we had two firms that were working with us at the time. And I felt it would be better that we have one. because I was getting finger pointing. No, it wasn't our job. It was this other person's job. Or no, it wasn't us that did that. That person works for them. So we got rid of the two. So we went from nothing in 2020 to something in 2021. That was Marina. We had knowledge saves lives for a little short period of time because of the Clery Act, and we had to get our Clery numbers together. So they were in as a consultant until we hired Tim in November of 2021. Since November 2021, we have been building. We have been working. You saw the slides, how many people have gotten trained, how many people have gone through, customer service, because that was some of the feedback that we got. I would say the quality of service that we have now from Marina is probably some of the best that I've seen from security officers, as all of us have come in contact with them. Are we there 100%? No, we aren't, but they're better than nothing. And frankly, we cannot count on, especially Oakland right now because of what's in disarray. And if you've been looking at Berkeley, they're having little issues of who they're going to hire for their police chief. The only one that's fairly stable right now is Alameda. So we're looking at doing a pilot with Alameda. I don't think we can go 50% and 50%. I don't think we can go 100% one way or 100% the other way. We're going to have to come up with some kind of hybrid, and there is no blueprint right now of how to do that. And in fact, people are surprised when we make presentations, basically Director Thomas making presentation because he's out in the field, always working to try to improve the services, find out what's out there, and then we take that and then make it our own. But our numbers compared to the city of Oakland, you may say, oh no, this is so, you look at the city, but our numbers on our campuses have been reduced, folks. It may be bad in Oakland, but we don't supervise Oakland. Oakland is a municipality that is overseen by the Oakland Police Department. We are responsible for our 5 sites, district office and the 4 campuses. And our statistics, which are based upon incident reports, and based upon the Clery that requires that we do this, have significantly gone down based upon the actions that we put forth with the training of Marina security. So I hope that addresses the question. If we were still planning, you would have nothing. You would be relying on OPD. And we know OPD does not respond quickly because they're losing their staff. The last I heard was 12% per month. 12% of their full-time law enforcement staff are leaving per month. You can figure out the math. So they've got to bring in people to replace those people. Those people are new. And the last statistic I heard was that for all of the calls, over 600,000 calls, there are 2 officers that are addressing those. So we cannot rely and say, oh, we'll get rid of, Marina security, get rid of the guards. Let's go with what? What else is there? So as you ask questions, be thinking of recommendations of what we can do, not just what you don't like. We already did that. That's why we're in the place we are now. But constructive comments, recommendations, please feel free to let us know. But we can't go with nothing. Not on my watch. And this is what I lose sleep over at night, is that something we haven't planned for will happen. Heaven forbid, knock on wood. Okay, Tim, why don't you give a little bit of the statistics?
Thank you, Dr. J. Just looking at it from a standpoint holistically, what we felt is getting on the ground, implementing these trainings with our first responders, which is going to be Marina security, would help not only increase our visibility, but it would also help us how we respond in case of emergency. what our campus roles and responsibilities are during an emergency and also during day-to-day operations. And so when we put these trainings together over the summer, we continued on the training base for the last 18, 19 months. And I want to share with you some of the training classes that we have. We've had 23 training class sessions that were held, and these were life-saving courses. We feel that if there is a case, knowing that we are in the #1 state of active shooter in the United States is California, we feel that you might be in a situation where you and the Marine security guard are in a room. And we understand that when emergency our municipalities respond, they're going to go to the threat. They're not going to administer CPR or first aid or perform any life-saving techniques with you and that person. We feel, based on statistics, that these things are exigent and that we feel that everyone needs to be trained in life-saving techniques. So that if you are in a room with a staff member, a student, or even an outsider trying to run for help, that you will have someone there that can help you. And we feel those measures are very, very important to our Peralta community. Is why we really focused on marine security, and then we transitioned to our faculty, where we've last year demonstrated and trained majority of our health and safety committee members on CPR and first aid, on Norcurrent training. If we have an opiate overdose on our campus, we've looked at some of the things that are immediate, number one, exigent, but also things that occur within our colleges throughout our nation. So we wanted to capitalize on that evidence base on training.
Yeah.
Second,
Tim, I was thinking more of there was, this is anecdotal, so if I'm wrong, correct me, but I was looking at statistics. For example, we were having, I think at one time, multiple break-ins at the Laney parking lot, sometimes 2 or 3 per day. And we started, we put Marina security out. We started getting license plates number. And I know it was a bit inconvenient for some people, but the statistics went down. We didn't have one incident, not one, in 2 weeks after we implemented that. So it works. They're not law enforcement. And trust me, we would not been able to get the sheriff's office to stand out there and get license plates numbers, but that was something that worked. The statistics show that the crime levels went down, but they were displaced and people moved over on 10th Street. So it wasn't like it went away from us. It just went away from our campus and moved into the community. So don't use Oakland as a whole to say how bad it is, because that's not what I'm seeing in our campus statistics.
And just to add to that, Dr. J, is when we implemented these strategies, we understand from the intel that the people that were committing these crimes in the city of Oakland were riding in parking lots without license plates and covering their face. So one of the main things was alerting our security teams on some of the things to look at, identifiers. And we had a chance to do that in the summertime to really enlighten our team. Once we put these things in place, we found within a threshold of 7 months, we had no vandalism and no stolen vehicles out of the student parking lot when we were having them every single day. Vandalism to student and faculty cars, not able to recognize and see these people come in. So we had to put checks and processes in to be able to safeguard our students' vehicles and faculty, but also our personnel on the ground.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Our next question is from Professor Gastis at Laney College. And she's asking, how much has the district paid Marina Security this year for their services? I think that's a really interesting question. And it also kind of begs a larger question, which is, what are the overall costs for safety? What is a policing service like Alameda County Sheriff's compared to public safety or security guards? Because I think there has been an assumption that unarmed security is cheaper, which is not the case. Chancellor, do you want to comment on that?
No, it's not cheaper. That's what people thought, but it's not. We were paying, and remember, this was in 2020, that's 4 years ago, almost. We were paying marina security somewhere around 4 million, a little over $4 million. The last contract that I recall, and IVC Smith, you correct me if I'm wrong on my numbers. I kind of have to look at the whole district, not just one area, but I recall it was somewhere around 5 million that we were paying, because people were surprised that, it's not cheaper, and it's, 3 years later with inflation and everything. But and I haven't factored that in. I'm not an economist, but I believe the last contract that went was about a little over 5 million. I can't remember.
Chancellor, so the first statement for $4 million, we also had A1 security at that time. So we were paying 2 because they did the night shift. And if I can recall correctly, Marina had 4 point something million dollars, and A1 security had another $2 million. Our budget at that time was $6 million. Then Marina Security, their last contract, I believe, was 5 million, but close to $6 million. Since then, we have gone out for a new RFQ, and in order to supplement that time that we went out for the RFQ to cover us for this fiscal year, we had to award Marina Security another $1.6 million to cover us until we went through the process. So that's for this fiscal year. Those are the numbers. I can double check to be absolutely sure, but those are very, very close.
And I also want to mention that even with the sheriff, we had A1 security, because during the holiday periods and when we were on break, that's who we brought in. So we were having those double costs even during the time that we had the sheriff. So that wasn't a cost that I factored in when I gave you the cost that I heard of back in 2020, 2019.
Sure, Chancellor. At that time, we were paying the sheriff's department close to $5 million, and also A1 security, they were close to $2 million. So each time we're, between $6 and $7 million for security. And at that time, we did not have 24-hour service. Now we have 24-hour service. So that is the difference also.
Thank you, IVC Smith. Hopefully that answers that question, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. Our next question is from Trustee Paulina Gonzalez Brito. They ask, what is criteria to escalating a situation by security calling OPD for help? I think
Tim, you want to answer that? I don't know.
Yes, ma'am. I can answer Dr. J. The criteria, when we train in the summer, don't want to release too much information on our training, but when we train, we look at dysregulated situations. And you might ask, what are dysregulated situations? This is when a student or a person that comes onto our campus is in a high volatile state of mind, and they're talking about violence, they're talking about threatening maybe a student. Those type of remarks we take very seriously. And sometimes that type of behavior is escalated to OPD. So anything that is not life-threatening is something that security practices not to escalate. We feel that if it's not life-threatening, we can handle it holistically by disseminating those reports to college administrators, and those reports going out to our care teams, our behavior care team, that can now deal with that student in a holistic model of trying to provide resources and also possibly discipline areas under the student code of conduct.
So, Tim, the Marina will call police if they need to?
Yes, Marina will call 911 if they need to, if it's outside the scope of their training. Great.
Thank you. Hope that answers the question. Next question is from Vivian Romero. She says, I see a dispatch number. Why would I call that number and at what time? I'll give the first part, and then I'll turn it over to Tim and Amy. Call dispatch in non-emergency safety and security situations. So for example, if you see somebody suspicious in an area on campus where you wouldn't expect to see that kind of activity, call campus public safety, call the dispatch number so that we can send out a security guard. I'll give you an example from my office. My office is in the Admissions and Records building at the corner of 8th Street and 5th Avenue. And we discovered that there were bullet holes in a window. If I had seen a shooter, I would have called 911, but after the fact, calling in that there was an incident of vandalism, that's when I would call the dispatch number. Director Thomas?
Yes, Mark. In the real case emergencies that are outside the scope of a security guard, which involve anything bodily injury or any person that may be in an area of suspicious, meaning that in our critical areas, we would prefer you call 911 if you see the things that are stand out to you regarding safety. But Mark, you hit everything on the head with your message. Director Marshall?
And we would also recommend that that's the number that you would call if you needed a safety escort. Or again, any other suspicious things, or things like if your car is broken into, or you see something that is any other safety kind of concern, someone smoking in the bathroom, just anything, any safety concern that you observe, feel free to call the dispatch, and when in doubt, err on the side of caution and give us a call.
Great. I thought I saw a hand go up from our participants, but I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
I think that was Amy. She wanted to make her comment.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is anonymous, and it's asking about Marina Bay security. And I think that this question has actually been addressed when we were talking about the difference between deputies and security, and also the differences in cost between private security and policing.
Yeah, I just want to make a observation, because I see this, and I'm sure all of you will recognize it. One of the things that they do in Alameda, at least, and I'm sure other cities too, is they will put a police vehicle in an obvious place, because they can't just have a policeman sitting there. So they put a police vehicle there, and guess what? When people see it, they don't know if somebody's in it or not. They automatically start slowing down, because it's like, oh, there's the popo. Let me make sure that, I'm, especially in Alameda, you're not going 5 miles over the speed limit. The same thing holds true when you see people in a uniform. You don't know what they are, but they represent some form of authority. They're not walking around in, tattered jeans and a holy t-shirt. They're in a uniform. And so automatically, because we have been, kind of taught that people in authority, law enforcement, fire department, those types of things, military even, wear a uniform. So by having a uniform presence on campus, just by having a uniform presence on the campus, has dampened the thinking and the psyche that we're a soft target. So I just want to put that out there, because there's this, I see questions about guards and marina security, and unless the board tells me otherwise, and they have not, they want to go back to having a contract with the full law enforcement, we're going to have to come up with some hybrid. We're not going to go fully with the arm, but maybe we need some kind of agreements and MOUs, which is something that I've asked him to look at. And we don't know we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what an MOU looks like with law enforcement. And if you've been paying attention to what's going on in Oakland, they're in a budget crunch. So yeah, I think they'd like to have some of that money that we're giving to Marina Security, but we can't have both at, $6 million each. So we've got to come up with something that is works for us, is responsive when we need it. We don't need it every day. We can handle a lot of things, and we've got to figure out what that formula is, and we haven't done that yet. Like I said, this happened in 2020. We're only in our third year and not even through the third year. So I think we've done a lot given the short period of time.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. Let's see, we had another couple of questions about the difference between safety and security teams versus policing teams and the costs associated, which we've already discussed. We have a question now about what training are we preparing and making available for all faculty and staff regarding physical safety at school, in offices and in the classroom. When was the last surprise safety drill held on campus? Director Thomas, Director Marshall, maybe you can comment on the training plans that you've already rolled out and how we'll be having more training for employees and students in the fall and spring.
Thank you, Executive Mark Johnson. I'll start it and then I'll roll over to Associate Director Amy Marshall. This summer, again, we wanted to figure out how to make safety a fun part of everyone's job or everyone's responsibility. We wanted to figure that out. We realized and heard the input from the colleges last year regarding training from our safety teams. And so we rolled out last year a few trainings to our safety team district-wide. One of the main things that we highlighted on last year was CPR and first aid. We thank the leadership over at the College of Alameda for providing us a training facility to be able to do that. We were rolling those trainings out Monday through Thursday. One of the very first times that we had a flexible schedule for our staff and training teams to come over to Alameda and be trained. The second training that we rolled out was NorCare training. We thank the BCC leadership staff, who was one of the very first colleges to be trained not only in CPR first aid, but also NorCare training, and also having it on the floor along with Marina Security. So that was one of the very first colleges to be able to take advantage of these trainings that we send out every month to our campus leadership. These trainings have times that are listed that not only can our campus administrators look at, but also our safety teams. And then you can jot in what training works for your team. This year, we're bringing the training to the colleges. And we're going to be emphasizing with our health and safety teams on some of those three topics you just saw. Those three topics I just mentioned. One of them would be CPR, first aid. Second will be building monitor training for our folks who are building monitors who have not been trained to be a building monitor. We'll be releasing that training coming to a college near you real soon. We'll also be bringing badging as well, kind of the combination of the two. So some of these trainings that I mentioned, we feel that are an essential during an emergency operating procedure during our campuses. This week on Saturday, we will be doing our first lockdown training, implementing our new training that we're going to be bringing also to the colleges following the building monitor training, which is lockdown training. And this course really goes into as a ICM, which is incident commander at the time of a lockdown. What is your role and responsibility during that time? What are you supposed to do? What are you required to do? And what is your staff during that time ordered to do? What are our assembly points where we operate as an ICM? Where do we meet is what I'm referring to. All those things. If that designated area is not available, what is our second designated area that's available that our staff also knows to operate, so now we can get into our logistical standpoint of incident commander. All of these things we're going to be bringing to the college to really get everyone acclimated with how state and federal will handle IC 300, IC 400 when we look at emergency incident commander. And I'll turn it over to Director Marshall.
Thank you. And so while we have ongoing scheduled training over at College of Alameda, the trainings that Director Thomas mentioned, will have the schedule out coming soon, but you can look forward to us. In addition to the building monitor training for emergency evacuation, we'll be having de-escalation trainings. We'll be putting on another mental health first aid training. We will be doing another CPR training and de-escalation, CPR, and Narcan, an active shooter. So those will be a range of trainings that we will be coordinating with your campus leadership to make sure that we can have good attendance at each of the campuses and make sure that it is at a time that's most convenient for the campus constituencies to attend. And please know that if you see a training advertised, with the exception of building monitor training, which is pretty specific to each college, you can always feel free to attend regardless of what campus it's at. The trainings, the responses, those things are the same for every location when it comes to CPR, mental health first aid, de-escalation. So please watch for those. And again, whether it's at one of the campuses or at our training facility at College of Alameda, we encourage you all to attend. And you know, if you had it once before but are feeling rusty or just would like to come again, there's no limit to the number of times you can attend. We want to make safety a habit, and we are looking for all of you to be our partners.
And just to go to what Tim and Amy were saying, there was a question, and I'm sure I've been peeking ahead, Mark, I admit, but this seems to be fairly salient to what we just talked about. Someone asked about training in terms of an exercise, or when do we plan to have something so that we can actually go through. We have to get enough people trained and get past that fulcrum of not knowing and knowing to be able to provide adequate training and walkthrough. And I will tell you, this is not new. This district did this when I was the president, or maybe I was the vice president at College of Alameda. So that had to be between 2004 and 2013. And we actually had an exercise there so that a practice, we sent out notices to everybody. We reminded them that we're going to be doing a practice, shelter in place. And I remember now how archaic it was, because we actually had one of our staff members with a bullhorn walking around yelling on the bullhorn, shelter in place, shooter on campus. This is a practice. You would never do that now. Everybody needs a shelter in place. I think if nothing else, people know that now, that you need to lock the door if it isn't locked. You need to turn off the lights. You need to get in the back of the room and remain quiet. Those are kind of things that we've learned through, you know, all of the different incidents that we've had on campuses, lessons learned, but we still need to practice. You know, we have the new rave system that we talked about, so we need to exercise that. So we probably will ask one campus, whoever gets ahead in terms of training, that we set something up in the spring to actually do a practice exercise. And I asked for everyone's cooperation. We aren't going to do it in the middle of, you know, peak enrollment, but we have classes going on all the time. So we will try to get the notice out in advance so people can make arrangements for their classes, or at least to let the classes know that we may get interrupted, you know, to go through this exercise, because guess what? Students need to know where the rally to. It's not just us. But those are things that we've got to get the training first before we start. You know, it's like, how can you give a test and you haven't trained or taught the class? People need to know what is expected, and then you actually practice and show that you know what to do. So just to answer that question, so we don't have to do it twice. Thank you, Mark.
I just wanted to add that we are encouraging all the health and safety committees at all the campuses to take the lead on doing that training. And Director Thomas has been and sitting in on those meetings and making sure that they're agenda items, because we need it not just to be led by the district, that each of the colleges need to be involved with doing that work.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Fred Martin has had their hand raised for a while. Would you like to make a comment or ask a question? You're on mute right now. Mr. Martin, you're on mute.
He's had his hand up so long, he's probably tired. Why don't you go to the next question and maybe Fred can chime in later on when he unmutes.
Okay, so the next question from Professor Carl Seebach, when will there be a district safety plan in place, and do we have an MOU with local authorities? Chancellor Jackson has already commented on our work on getting an MOU, but right now we don't have anything in place. As far as the district safety plan goes, there are communication protocols that are spelled out by campus in the annual security report. I know that my office has been working with risk management coordinator Carrie Burdick on updating a lot of the elements that are embedded in our emergency plans, such as updating the flipboards that are in each classroom on the campus, telling people what to do in case of an emergency, where the maps go. As Chancellor Jackson just said, if we're doing an emergency situation or a lockdown, people need to know, if it's an evacuation situation, where are we meeting up so that we can do a head count. So Marcus Creel, the graphic designer in my office, is working with Carrie Burdick on updating those maps so that we have them out to share. Let's see, our next question is, the questions about whether to bring back the marshals. I saw a question that disappeared. I think Amy answered it, but the question was, why don't we have our own law enforcement in-house, like the Sacramento Community College District? And I think that is an interesting option that we haven't discussed out loud in this forum. So Chancellor Jackson, maybe you can comment on the difference between security guards, external policing, and bringing police in-house.
Okay. I've been on all three campuses, all different types. Fresno, when I was at State Center for 20 years, we had our own internal. If you have your own internal police force, which Peralta had, by the way, before we went with the sheriffs, and maybe even before that, Peralta had its own internal law enforcement police officers with weapons and such. And there was some kind of incident where the weapon was taken away from the security. This is what I heard. I'm just telling you, this is what I heard. Why we went to the sheriffs and went away from our own public was there was some kind of incident with a weapon, and a faculty at Laney, and a faculty member was injured because of that. So the decision was made. Our people weren't trained. Our people, couldn't run 600 yards, forget half a mile or the distance of a campus. They weren't in shape. They hadn't maintained their update on weapons firing. There were a lot of things. And so the decision was made then to go to law enforcement and to go to Alameda. There may have been something in between that, but that was the story I was told. So then we did the sheriff's office, and I already told you what was going on during that period of time in 2020 with, the BART shootings and the Black Lives Matters and all of that happening across the country. So then there was a movement led by our own Libby Schaaf, Mayor Schaaf at the time, to defund the police. And so we went through that period of defunding the police in Oakland, which is part of the reason that we're where we are now with lawlessness, I think, in Oakland, because we don't have police officers. We don't have enough police officers. So the board made that decision, is that there has to be something better. it doesn't need to be all or nothing. You know, we totally go with people on campus that are law enforcement, or we go with our own. And to go with our own, the cost is not going to be any less because they become permanent employees, which is what happened at most RIOs. They still have to maintain the same post training that any police officer carrying a weapon has to go through. They have to be able to pass a physical fitness test. And there's a lot of different things that are required in that. So it's not going to be any cheaper to do that. And then you still, like we did before, during those periods of time, because they're employees, you know, we get what, Christmas off, we're closed, except for maybe intercession at College of Alameda. We have spring break. You know, we have a lot of things where if as an employee, you're off. So that means we'd still have to add someone to come in for those gaps that we have when we don't have our own employees available. So it's not a simple, you know, let's pick this or let's pick that. We need to pick something that works for us. Hence the safety, district-wide safety committee to work with us. And it took us 7 months to get the structure of that safety committee. So it's representative, it's a collegial consultation body, and it just got started. Like I said, it took us 7 months to get the structure, and we finished in March of 22. And they had their first meetings in the fall of 22, and now we're in spring of 23. So again, it may seem like it's been around for a while, but our structures and our processes have not. And we're slowly gaining traction, and we're moving forward. And in fact, we're becoming a model because people are saying, how are you doing this? We're doing it with a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of support from many of you that are out there. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. We'll give Mr. Fred Martin another opportunity to speak. Fred's hand is up and he's in the panelist room. Fred, do you have a comment or a question? Okay. Waiting for that. If there's anybody else who would like to make a comment or ask a question, now is the time. We've just got a couple more open questions. So one of those open questions is that there are many programs available. Why not research and locate good training to bring to our campuses? That's a really great question. And I think that our public safety office is doing that. In fact, I went to a training earlier this year that was conducted by Alameda County personnel, which was about de-escalation and understanding what the psychological state of an individual might be in, how to gauge that, how to de-escalate the situation. That was not done in-house. That was done by an Alameda County social worker. Tim, Amy, Dr. J, anything else you want to add on that?
Yes, thank you, Executive Mark Johnson. Myself, really want to look at training from a different standpoint, different lenses. So College of San Mateo hosted with the FBI, School Asylum, most of all of the directors from Northern California got together in San Mateo, and we discussed safety with the FBI and really looked at it from a standpoint of school plots versus unsuccessful school plots, and where the training breakdown was with school administrators, behavior care teams, and also the debrief. Got a chance to be in small groups, breakout sessions to discuss training that I brought back here at Peralta. Is why one of the reasons when we have behavior incidents that are on campus that deal with student conduct, that is unchecked behavior. And we understand that we don't want unchecked behavior to go unnoticed. We want the signs and symptoms that we see from that behavior to be now assessed and disseminated to our care administrative team, who are subject matter experts that can now handle that situation. One of the things that we've done with that is we use a holistic model approach. And what that means is that when we get these type of incidents that could be borderline criminal versus information incidents, we're handling them internally with our resources. And so that's one of the things that we looked at, some of the training you can take away from the FBI and CIA training behavior assessments when it comes to our students and training, and how those things lead to other things, which are active shooters, which are in situations that fall over from unchecked behavior, and how those situations were missed. So that training kind of really highlighted that. We brought that here. We're currently putting the processes in place here from a district office standpoint to address some of that training moving forward with our college administration.
So I don't know, Amy, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that he covered it pretty much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will remind everybody that we just launched the IEPI Professional Development and Learning Center this year in February. That is the vehicle and the mechanism by which we will be conducting a staff training. But again, Amy just came on board in July. This is September. We only have one person. That was Director Thomas since 2021. So keep it in perspective. I know everybody wants us to take care of everything, but it takes a little bit of time, especially if we're going to do it and have the processes in place so that they're standardized across the district, not just one campus. So that's what they're working on now, is pulling that together. I don't see them being the only trainers that are out there. We've already brought in, like Mark said, Alameda Health to do that. We've had workshops with other law enforcement agencies, and we've been working since Tim came on board to try to develop a MOU. We thought we were close at one point. Everybody said yes, yes, yes. And the next thing we know, there is no police chief. Any possibility of an MOU is out the window because the new people didn't want to do anything. You know, so we looked at other cities, and right now it looks very promising as a test case with Alameda. They are interested in working out something with us. But again, that diplomacy, going back and forth, looking to see what people can offer at a price that we can afford, is where we are right now. And moving forward with additional training is what we are doing, because we can do some of that in-house. But we are still looking at the MOU with all of our entities. You know, Berkeley, Emeryville doesn't have a police force, I don't believe. Albany and Alameda, so that we can cover all of our campuses. That's why we went with the sheriff's office, is because they cover all of those jurisdictions, and we had one entity. Now that we don't have them, then we need to look at some other options.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. There are not any open questions in the Q&A. And the only hand raised is Mr. Martin, who's had an opportunity to speak and hasn't. So, Chancellor Jackson, I'd suggest if there are any closing comments that you want to make, now would be a good time, and we'll wrap this up.
Okay, first of all, thank you for those of you that are still here. I think at our height, we had 139 people attending, and there were a lot of questions, some of them repetitive, maybe some of them pre-written and just posted. I'm not sure, but hopefully we got to all of those and provided some understanding of where we are and a status of where we are and where we are looking at going forward. I ask that we need to work together as a community. It isn't finger pointing of where our shortfalls are. It really should be, how can we get better? I want to thank Carmen. I'm going to call her out, Carmen Johnson, who has been here and is the representative for the classified professionals. Carmen, wave your hand. Carmen is up at Merritt College, and she is a co-chair along with Dr. Kimberly King from Laney College, who is a faculty representative working with Executive Director Thomas to develop the agendas, to get information out. we've been talking about doing a newsletter because things happen so quickly. It won't be like the gyms, Mark. We won't give you any competition when it comes to that, but just something to get information out to people. Amy, thank you for making that recommendation. I know Tim had talked about it. He and I talked about it, but when you're the only person there, it's kind of hard to do everything. So I want to thank all of you. We did not combine this with facilities like we did previously. We'll be having probably a webinar on facilities. The board has asked for updates, and we're looking at doing a webinar sometime in October on the status. We just let out some more contracts. So I want to thank everybody. And I also want to urge, if you go back and look at those surveys, there were only 19 administrators that took that survey. So you need to lead by example, administrators, because it's going to fall on you as the leaders within your departments and within your areas. And if you don't know what's going on, how are you going to help your staff? How are you going to help your the other employees within your area and our students? So this is something for everybody. It's not a selective, I'll learn about it, next week, because we don't know what's going to happen next week. Things are happening indiscriminately every day. So please, when we offer the training, find the time in your calendar to attend.
Thank you,
It's
Chancellor.
not an option. It's not an option. I'm sure, people who have been in incidents never thought it would happen to them, but it does, and it can. And we want to be prepared. So, Fred, sorry we didn't get to your question. Maybe you can post it at a later date, but we will have this on the website. We will send out a link for those who could not be here. And if you have any additional questions, you can always email Director Thomas and Marshall, and they will get back to you. And DC Huff is now Director of Facilities for the district. He didn't say very much, but he is a person on facilities issues, and we will continue to march. Margaret Stacy, my former, current, and working retirees, we will continue on to. Now, I did see Lee Peavy had a hand up, but it went down. So, Lee, did you have a question?
Yeah, it lowered, but I'm here.
Okay.
No, I just want to make a comment that the CPR trainings and stuff that you guys come up with, as far as the schedule and stuff goes, I will go ahead and sign up for it. But a lot of the materials, especially when I went through the mental health first aid, a lot of the online stuff was not accessible for screen readers. So if at all possible, whenever you do CPR, any other trainings, if I sign up for it, is there any way that I can get the materials in advance so that I can convert them to an alternate format for myself?
Thank you, Lee. For those of you that don't know, Leah's SAS has some disabilities, and so absolutely. I'm not sure. The state used to do that for us, Lee. I don't know if they're still doing it.
Yeah.
Or SAS, but Tim, you and Amy, please take note as we do training to have things in an alternate format.
Now, if you can get it to me as a PDF, then I can take it and do whatever I need to do, to get it to work. But and yeah, I also come from a Cal Fire background a little bit too. I won't get into a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm familiar with SIMS, NIMS, ICS. I was certified at one point to teach, but like an idiot, I let my certification expire. So But so that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
All right, thanks, Lee. And Lee has been one of those individuals, when we offer training, he's there and he's on the safety committee. So rah, keep it going. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, I'm also alternate co-chair on the Health and Safety Committee up here at Merritt.
Very good, very good. Dr. Thompson, your hand was up before we close out. You're muted.
I wanted to offer up that from the survey and from conversations I've had with different folks that there seems to be a breakdown in communication between what's happening at the district office, all the great work that Tim and Amy are doing, all the great trainings that are happening whenever there's an incident, any of those things that occur, that that Tim is responsible for making sure that it gets pushed out, and he's going to share some information about training now. But just any of that, it seems that there is a disconnect. It's not a new thing. You know, I left the district in 2014 and we were still saying the same thing that I'm getting ready to say now. But there is a disconnect between, you know, what's happening at the district office and that information, once it gets to the colleges, how is it disseminated? And we really need to have conversations about how we can do a better job with that. Even on the health and safety committees, we have representatives, very mindful about having representatives from different constituent groups, really encouraging those constituent representatives to go back and share that information, because there's so much going on. And so when I hear people say that we're not doing anything or things aren't happening, then it's kind of disheartening. And it even kind of showed up in the survey a little bit, that people aren't aware of what's happening. So I'd really like to have a conversation about how we can work on our communication better.
So Amy, Tim, maybe that can be an item that is on the agenda, and maybe keep it on the agenda until you guys get to a point where you're satisfied. Carmen, if you're part of that tri-chair, I think that you're getting a comment that you guys discuss it in committee and come up with some recommendations. I like the idea of a newsletter, but again, it's only as good as people reading it. So
yeah, great idea.
Maybe do like President Besikoff, start a, you know, what is he?
His podcast, his radio show.
Podcast. Thank you. Maybe do a podcast. You know, maybe people will log in on a podcast.
Only if Draymond Green hosts it. Oh.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all for attending. Appreciate it. We'll get this
Thanks,
posted.
everyone.
Bye-bye.